How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. Sorry for the slight delay in starting today. Today's live stream, we are basically continuing some of the conversation that we started last week about, kind of walking through some of the various settings that we have in the cameras and the options that you have, like where they are in the menu, how to actually go through them, and through a number of the kind of messages that I got from last week's session into this one, there's about 3 or 4 that I really kind of want to dig into on this particular stream this week, but then also open it up to just general questions and comments like what we've done for the last couple of streams anyway. We're going to jump into that. So if you have questions for, certain features that you want to find out how to use, where to find them in some of the menus, things like that, tag it in the comment section, tag at LUMIX USA. This way I can see it, and we can get through and actually go to the demo with it. I've changed up the demo camera today. I'm using my GH7 because we're going to go into some of the functionality that we have specifically in this camera. We can kind of go through that. I have my S5 Mark II X also over here, so I can plug that in if we need to go in through that system as well. So we're going to jump into that in a second. Before we go into those conversations, I want to remind everybody in the US about LUMIX Pro services. We have Red and Platinum tier. Red tier is free. If you've got a LUMIX camera or you're planning to buy a LUMIX camera, know that you can use the QR code on the screen or the link down in the description. Get yourself Red membership for free. It gets you your 3-year added extended warranty for all your new purchases. If you're someone who needs a much higher level of service and support, you've got the Platinum tier available as well. That is a paid level service. That's going to get you 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways. It gets you that extended 3-year manufacturer warranty as well. And then on top of it, you get access to our membership hotline. So that's Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where you can speak to someone to get service and support. You'll also get the 20% off out of warranty repairs in case you drop or break something, and then you get your annual sensor cleaning, calibration, lens firmware updates, camera firmware updates, all that kind of fun stuff to keep your equipment in tip-top shape. So let's kind of dive into it. There were a couple comments and stuff that had actually come through before the stream started, so I want to address a couple of these. The first one's from Andrew. It says macOS Sequoia bug, ? Prevents recognition of external cameras. So while I can tether LUMIX S5.2, no option in Teams, Zoom, etc. To select LUMIX as a webcam. So Andrew, for that particular setup, I honestly haven't tested it in a while because I don't really use the LUMIX webcam drivers anymore. I just use an external capture card for like 90% of my streaming. In fact, actually, I'll show you which one I use. So this is what I use for when I'm streaming like remotely, like through my laptop. It's just an HD 60S from Elgato, or I'm using the 4K Pro in my desktop, or I'll use an A10 Mini to do HDMI. It just gets me a higher resolution for the streaming that I want to do with it. The webcam drivers, they've always been beta. They were designed back during the pandemic. So if you were looking for something like that, that's going to be down to whether or not the software in macOS is still recognizing the program itself or the driver set. According to my knowledge, everything should be working fine. And if there is a disconnect on it, it's most likely on Apple's side with something changing between the translation layer for the newer series computers. But if you don't have those installed and you're just using LUMIX Tether, that's going to be a much more, direct into macOS if they've changed something. If you are using LUMIX Tether, make sure that you're keeping it up to date, that you're using the most recent release of it, because things are consistently updated on that program as well. But also look at the site as far as what OSs have been tested and worked for. Mac OS is one of the weird things where technically newer versions should be fine with older, like programs designed for older, as long as it was something that was built, I believe, when they made the shift into, I think it was Monterey, maybe one of them. As long as everything made it into there fine, then it should still be fine moving forward. But I can do a little bit more research and check, but I haven't really ever seen much of a problem with it. But as I said, if I'm really going to be doing anything serious with streaming, just picking up one of these things that's just USB, they're so inexpensive, and the quality you get is way higher than what you're going to get versus like over USB streaming. So it's my recommendation for that. A couple of the other questions that came in here. Followed up with LUMIX support about code not working on your S5 Mark II. Message you on Instagram. Not sure why it's a physical box. They've escalated my case. So yeah, the S5 Mark II, if you want to unlock the raw over HDMI functionality, it's the DMW-SFU2. That is the code that you use for the unlock for it. It is a physical box. I understand. That's just how that product comes. But yeah, that should be what it is. I can double check and look through some the messages that you sent over. I've been a little hectic over the last week and a half, so I haven't really been able to keep too much on messages that come out of like a normal communication path, like through the LUMIX USA email address, the LUMIX Live email address, or some of the other stuff. But yeah, I'd have to take a look a little bit more there. So yeah, you have the right code. Not sure why it failed activation. Says it's already in use. So Tech, one of the things I'd ask is, so one, is the camera brand new? Did you buy the camera new? Did you buy the code direct from us, or did you buy it on Amazon? Did you buy it from a dealer? Because if the code is registering that it's been activated, it means that either one of two things: either the serial number has been activated before with a code, or the code itself has been activated and used somewhere and could be potentially a return that we did not see. Bought it new at launch. Okay, so you bought the camera new at launch. Okay, so at that point, I mean, you could check with our service and support team, which I think you said you did already. Well, LUMIX support about this code not working. I'm S5 Mark II. Okay. Oh, Henry's in Canada. So so there's a couple things you could take a look at. Box for the code was sealed. Okay. Yeah, I mean, if it's a brand new camera that's never been activated with a code before, and the code is in-box sealed, never used, and Henry's can confirm that it was not a return or anything like that, then yeah, I think the only path really to get resolution is through the service team. They may end up, needing or wanting to, like, say, send the camera in or something like that, or checking with the serial number, or not serial number, the activation code, because that is such a weird situation. Usually it's like one of those things I listed before is usually where the problem came in, right? Like, it's either the camera was activated at once or it was bought used, but you've cleared that out. The box itself for the code was opened or resealed or something along those lines or whatever, and then, that could be the problem, is that someone, potentially dodgily bought the code, activated it, put it back in a box, and returned it. So yeah, as long as you sent all that kind of stuff in with them, honestly, that's probably the only path, I think, at least from my side, because there's not much I'd be able to really kind of add other than, the service team needs to do it, because they will talk directly with Japan, and the teams that manage the activation side of all of that, and then hopefully get your resolution pretty quickly on it. But yeah. All right. So DJ, will you guys be at CES? Would be cool to visit and say hello. I'm fairly certain I'll be at CES. Usually I am one of the people that's always, kind of assigned to go to CES to work the Panasonic booth. So as we get closer to that, obviously we'll let everyone know on here if I'm going to be there, if Matt Fraser will be there, that kind of thing too. Andrew B, thanks Sean. Other manufacturers have same Sequoia problem. Canon addressing with EOS webcam utility pro software. Okay. Yeah. Then I mean, it's stuff that like if our engineering team, like, because they are working on, obviously as new versions of OSs come out, they'll always take a look at them. So, cool. Both are afraid to buy a second code for the other camera. Oh, Tech Mixer. So you own 2 of them, both brand new. I'm afraid to buy a second code for the other camera. I mean, one of the other things to possibly check is to use that code and see if it works on the other camera. Because that could also be one of the things to check too, is because you can then identify, is it a code problem or is it the camera serial number problem? If you do that, it could make it easier to isolate out where the challenge is. But okay, so let's actually dive into some of the actual topic that I've got, kind of prepped a bit for today. Could you update us in any development regarding the customizing of AF box size, color type? Yeah, I don't have any updates on that stuff. We've passed the info on to them, and they've got it. Stuff like that, a lot of times it sounds easier to do than it potentially is, but also sometimes it runs into where, like I said last week, where on priority list are some of these things. So, but yeah. You're welcome, Tech Mixer. Sorry I wasn't able to get a better solution for you right now other than service and support, but... Chris, is there a way to do embedded timecode in the S5 II or X? Final Cut Pro doesn't do audio timecode, so it's an extra step in post to turn audio timecode into metadata. No. The S5 Mark II, Mark II X, those cameras only output timecode. You can't embed timecode. To my understanding, it's not coming either. If you need a camera that can do timecode, injection, into the product, that's where like a GH7, GH6, the S1H, those are the cameras that can do it. And, it's one of those things where certain categories of cameras are just not going to have all the features that, maybe you specifically need in some categories. Yeah. Chris also, do you have a list of recommended HDMI cables? So no, we don't really have a list of recommended HDMI cables. My biggest recommendation for HDMI cable in general is the naming structure of, what an HDMI cable is rated for is like all over the place. And it has been all over the place for years. HDMI 2.0, 2.1, A and B spec, or 1.4, and which ones are really going to be okay for you or not. The most important thing I think to really look at is look at the throughput number. So you'll see like 18, 24, 48 gigabit per second. You want to buy the fastest cable that you can from a reputable brand. What I mean by reputable brand is, if you go into like the dollar store or, a low cost store and just grab an HDMI cable off the shelf, it's probably not going to work in any kind of extended period of time. Some of those cables, they may work okay, and you may be fine for, a short period of time. But when you start going into things like RAW over HDMI, you start really running into problems. Most HDMI cables that you can find these days are going to be fine for things like 4K 60p to send out, to an external monitor. The RAW functionality, things like 4K 120, RAW output over HDMI, they really stress the throughput of the cables themselves. So you buy quality, and watch out for a lot of like snake oil marketing that you see on HDMI cables. You'll see a lot of stuff get thrown around about, these like ridiculously high-end cost cables. A lot of times actually, the vast majority of times, none of that stuff actually makes any difference. I referenced it a couple weeks ago. I think Linus Tech Tips did a really good kind of dive into HDMI cables in general. So I encourage you to go take a look over at their video on it. Not that they need any more recommendations to be like, go watch an LTT video. But showing like how, $1,000 cable is not necessarily any better than, a $30-$40 cable, that in a very broad sense. But yeah, so I'd recommend that. Brand wise, I use some of the Condor Blue HDMI cables, and they've always worked well for me. Just like any cable, you got to be careful with them. You don't want to, kink them too hard. You don't want to, kind of make weird runs with them. Watch the length of the cables that you go. Longer the cable, the more noise gets into the signal there. The less reliable they can be. So typically try to run the shortest you can that gives you the proper set for what you're building. And then, yeah, you should be kind of good to go there. Al says, is there anything to be aware of when using adapters to use full frame PL lenses on the GH7? Is the anamorphic D-squeeze and IBIS 1:1 setting wise, or must I compensate for something? So the anamorphic D-squeeze functionality and the stabilization, you go by what the lens is designed for. If it's a 2x lens, set it to 2x. If it's a 1.33, set it to 1.33. Set it for what the lens is. Don't overcomplicate it with like math or anything like that of like, well, crop factor and all this kind of stuff. Anamorphic is just determining because you're gonna de-squeeze the footage a certain amount. This optic is designed as a 2x anamorphic, so set it as 2x anamorphic. It's about as simple as that, honestly. Let's see here. Andy says, I have both Sony and LUMIX full frame. On Sony, I have the 7200 f4 macro. Gives me a 2:1 in any focal length distance I put it in. Is there something like that on L mount using the S5 Mark II? I think the closest is going to be like our 70-300, but I think that's a 1:2 macro at 300 millimeter. I think so. Yeah, this is probably the closest one then, would be 70-300. It's going to be a little different than what you're working with on that Sony lens. Yeah, because each of them are going to be a little different in what their designs are. Let's see here. Now that the XM5 is on the market, are there plans to cut the price of the S9 to compete? No, we don't have to. The S9 sells perfectly fine at its price point. That camera is so much less than what the S9 can do, so yeah. Please consider 1 power zoom for L mount, 2 hybrid zoom for S5 Mark II, G9 Mark II, and live composite for the S9. FC, you mentioned before GH6, GH7 supports USB-C PD that delivers 9-volt 3-amp into the camera's USB port. The power pack is labeled USB PD 3.0 or QC 3.0. Will it deliver 9-volt 3-amp? This is a good question, FC. So let me see if I have one of my power amps here. So 9-volt 3-amp is going to be a relatively common like power output that you'll find on a USB-C device. Like this is a Ugreen 145 watt power bank, right? That I use for my laptop. What the biggest thing really is that while, yeah, if it says USB, PD, it's supposed to be built into a spec and it should have the output on it. Not every device is going to say that. Like now, like this one just says that it has 140 watt output on USB-C, like the out one on this. You really need to look at what's either written on the device or on the device's website to see whether or not it supports that rail. My understanding is I don't think USB 3.0 has a requirement that it necessarily needs 9-volt 3-amp. because you could do 9-volt 2 amp, you could do 5-volt 3 amp. So you have all these different, kind of little ratings, but as long as that device actually says, output 9-volt 3 amp, you're going to be fine, because that's what the camera has to see and be communicated with for it to turn on the USB power delivery. Wish it was more simplified than that, but I've had even USB-C devices that have the right wattage output, but are just missing that one combination of voltage and amps out. So I have to look for power delivery over 9-volt 3 amp, 27 watt at least. In a broad sense, yes, but you want to make sure that it has the ability to output specifically 9-volt 3 amp. Not all 27 watt hour devices will support that exact output. We do have a list online that kind of shows you which we have tested. It is a bit older because it's primarily this thing. This is one of the Power Core, like the big boys, and this one does support it. It does even say USB PD on it, and this uses their IQ stuff from Anker. But again, the most important thing is make sure somewhere on that spec list it's saying 9-volt/3 amp, and then you'd be good to go. Andy, I know you guys are probably working on it, but give us a small MFT camera with PDAF already. No clue if that's even something that's in the plan. Tostada Tony, in 24 hertz mode, only 5.7K and 4.4K support 48 FPS, a 420. Is it possible to have DCI or UHD 48 and 422? Probably not, because 420 to 422, 422 ends up pushing more heat into the system. So it's basically the recording modes and the capabilities that you see that the cameras have as of now, for the most part. This is a bit of a generalization. For the most part, what you see is kind of what you're getting, unless there's something major that kind of changes, like RAW over HDMI, internal RAW, like on the GH7. So yeah, that's just kind of how that is. Celtic Cameras, the DMW DCC-18. What is the stock situation? I keep checking the UK LUMIX store, but since it's announced, it's never been in stock. Are there supply issues? No, there are no supply issues. It's a matter of whether or not they're being ordered by your dealers, by the store that you're in, or that you're looking to buy from. If they're ordering them, if you're letting that store or that location know that it's something you want, they can get them. We have them. It's not a supply problem. That would be a retailer not ordering them for you to buy. Yeah. It says, I was filming multiple people in a shot with multiple boxes popping up on the S5 IIX. How do I get the yellow box on the person I want and lock it on that person? So a couple things you can do. If you're using the full area, so you're using the entire frame, that's where you can use the joystick and kind of move through those areas and reselect the subject you want. I believe, if I remember right, you can even tap on the box and then kind of go there. What I typically recommend, and maybe this is partially because of my past of how I've always kind of just used cameras, I will go into either one area or one area plus with the subject detection on, and I will basically just put the box or the selection area in the area where I want that subject to be framing wise, and then I will just make sure that that box is on top of the person that I want to have in the frame. If I want to move that to a different person, different subject, I can literally just, even while the camera's to my face, use the touch screen and just move that box to the person I want. And then it lets the subject detection take over for that particular setup. But that's how I typically do it. As far as being able to say, like, select a person and lock it there, that is something that the system doesn't do at this point. Cool. So let's jump into my GH7 really quick here, because I want to talk about the proxy recording setups that we've got on this camera and the S5 Mark II and the S5 Mark IIX. For those that don't remember, the proxy recording is something that we did also bring to a number of cameras because of the addition of things like Frame.io for our camera to cloud functionality. So we're looking through my my GH7 here, and proxy setting, for those that don't know, it's a smaller, lighter file that you can use in a couple of ways. If you're someone who's doing, say, like social media content, and you're doing delivery for, you know, Instagram Reels or Stories or something like that, right? You may not need the full 4K version. The 1080p proxy file may be perfectly fine for that particular output. Or if you're working on a much higher level, you know, kind of edit or a longer form, you know, kind of thing that you're creating, maybe editing with proxies is a little bit easier for the, you know, hardware that you're using to make the edit with. So with the cameras, we've added in the ability to do proxy video recording. So when you go into the actual kind of image format page here, there's a couple ways to kind of go about picking out, you know, okay, which option allows me to do proxy. One of the first ways, and the way that I recommend doing it, is when you go into the record quality option here, you'll see that I can press the display button and I can come down and I can filter to say, show me the options that allow me to do proxy. You'll see that it cuts it down by half. You go to 38 options here. So when I press display again, you'll see that I have the highest end that I can do is a C4K 60p, which is 422, 10-bit all intra. But I can even go all the way down here into my full HD options, which is a bit ironic, right? I can do full HD 24p 4208 bit, and I can also still record proxies with that. So being able to do this means that, okay, as I go through the menus, I know which ones have the ability. This is going to give me the ability to do proxy recording, so I can select that. When I scroll down into the proxy recording settings, this is where I get, you know, some of the extra choices here. I can turn on proxy recording, so if I want to do proxy, I have to turn this on. And then I also have my rec quality. This is where I've got my high, medium, and low. Now your low side, this is going to be a 720p. It's going to be, in this case, 60p because it's tied to the frame rate that you're selecting as your main file. And it's a 6 megabit per second. So it's a really small, lightweight, you know, 720p proxy. Really good for if you're working on, say, a laptop that maybe is a little bit older and, you know, you still want to be able to edit and export out your high res. You can do your editing with the proxy and then link them later. Then we got a bit higher end, so 9 megabit per second with 1080p, and then all the way up to the highest at 16 megabit. If you're someone that's going to be doing social media delivery and, you know, you're going to capture your 4K so that you've got the main file as either a backup or, you know, you just know that you're going to need a 4K at some point, this is where, you know, make sure that you're setting this at high. You do have to have two cards in the camera, or you have to have a card in the SD card slot and a USB-C for your external SSD. Those are to make sure that you can do the proxy, because proxies will always get recorded to the SD card in slot 2. The other thing that's on here that you see is that the real-time LUT proxy thing that you have here. Now, right now, it's saying I can't set this because I'm in the vlog picture profile. So if you wanted to be able to have it where your proxies are recorded with a pre-baked in look, but your main footage is still, say, in log, this is where I'm going to come in and I'm going to go up to the photo style option. I change this to real-time LUT, go into the LUT option here, and then I can pick which one I want to actually use. So in this case, let's say like I want to throw, well, we'll probably just actually leave, because these are all the, we'll just leave the Vlog 709 one on, right? So once you select this and you say, hey, I want the LUT for real-time LUT to be the, in this case, Vlog 709, turn it off. Once that's off, what you're going to notice is that if I'm looking at the proxy record settings, I can, oh, did I actually change my, I didn't actually change my color profile. That would be a useful thing to do. So we're going to go to real-time LUT, turn that off. We're going to save this. Now we are in the why is it still letting me say? Yeah, we're gonna go down into proxy, and then real-time let proxy. When I turn this on, this is now going to read that file that I put into the proxy menu and said, hey, this is what I want you to use for proxy. And now your main file will be captured as log. Your proxy file will be captured with the look that you've kind of programmed in there to say, like, hey, use this as reference for the proxy. So that'll make, in some cases, that can make the actual editing and the workflow process there a lot easier, especially if you're doing this more on a, say, like social media delivery. I know I use it a lot in situations where, like, maybe I'm recording something for a training session or something like that, and I'm going to be editing the main video upload that I'm going to do in, a full graded process. But I just need something real short for that, real quick, mobile access to it, where it's going to be a vertical video. That's where I'll just end up using the proxies for that part. I saw a whole bunch of commentary going back and forth, so I want to jump back real quick and see this stuff. Tom says, what do I get going from the 50mm f1.8 to the S Pro 50 f1.4 using on an S5 IIX? So you are going to get a very different look between the two lenses. Yes, you go from f1.8 to an f1.4, so you get a little bit shallower depth of field. But ultimately, the thing that you get when you move to the S Pro series lenses, the couple of them that we have, is that a lot of the stuff that people tend to kind of bulk characterize under character of a lens are what you see in those optics. So the 50-1.4 at 1.4 or even at f1.8 is going to be a little bit sharper than the 50 f1.8 at wide open. The rendering of the image is also different between the two lenses. The 50 f1.4, the S Pro, is a lens designed in collaboration with Leica for the certification of it, so it has to hit what their stylistic and their quality look is. So you're going to have, different rendering of an image. And by rendering of an image, I mean that the color tonality will be different between the two lenses, because you may or may not know, lenses impart a color tonality to your image as well. Things like the sharpness, the contrast, the flaring, the focus motors, the fit and finish of the lens, they're all going to be higher quality on the S Pro series. You also get, some of the little stuff too, like, because I actually have mine here. You also get the manual focus clutch ring here. So if you're someone who likes to do manual focus, you've got that. You get the aperture ring with it as well. It's a full metal build on this lens. Much bigger front element on this as well. So you get a lot of stuff that ultimately you have to determine, are those benefits worth it for the cost of the lens? As someone who doesn't really care about size and weight of the equipment that I'm using all the time, there are some times, I'd prefer to take the 50 f1.8 because it's a little bit smaller, lighter. There is something that I just really love about the look and the rendering I get out of the 51.4 that maybe you'll get the same feeling for, maybe you don't. It's a lens that I highly encourage, if you have the ability to rent one and test it and play around with it and see if it fits what you need. That's what'll help you make the decision as to whether or not, the increased weight and the size of that lens is worth it for the image quality that you get out of it. A lot of independent testing has been done on that lens since it's one of the older lenses in the lineup, and it still holds strong even to today. So let's see here. Orange, just want to say thanks for helpful streams. It's cool to learn power user life hacks. Yeah, I mean, that's always what we're trying to do is get you guys, the hopefully information that helps you, kind of just customize the cameras a little bit more so that they're easy for you guys to use in the real world. Let's see here. Andy, if I get the S9 in white from the UK, being from the US, will I have issues with being PAL, or can I switch to NTSC with no issue? It's a good question. I'm not sure. Cameras are regionalized. I think the European cameras will have 60p and stuff like that. But you do have to remember that should you have any problem with that camera, it's not a camera bought in the United States, so you're kind of on your own with service and support at that point, should anything go wrong. Martin, hi Sean, could you please explain what the definition of highlight weighted metering mode on the GH7? As per manual, it's measuring which focuses on highlighted parts of the scene 2 of the screen to prevent overexposure, and what exactly is meant by highlighted. Does it relate to the size and position of the focus rectangle? Yeah, so highlight... Actually, let me go into the camera because I think I can show this on the camera here. So there's a couple different metering modes that you'll see on cameras. You've got, you know, your multi-metering, center weighted, spot, and then you've got the this setup right here. So the difference with a lot of these here. So if I go to like spot metering, and let me put this into a mode that's going to auto adjust so that I can, it'll just be a little easier, I think, to demo and show what we're looking at here. So right now, and let's move this around. So right now I'm in spot metering, and if I move my camera a little bit here, you can see down under the audio levels, you'll see that I have, it's right by the word Sigma there. You'll see that I'm in spot metering, and I'm getting a very specific look. So, you know, because I'm looking at a white frame, and this is being tied into my focus point here, you see that, like, okay, you know, we're getting a very specific, you know, kind of exposure from this image. But if I go in and I change this to the highlight spot metering, notice that the pinpoint is not there anymore on this. And as I kind of go through and I'm looking at the spot metering here, it's not necessarily tying to the focus point. It's looking at the entire image saying like, hey, you know, yes, you're using spot metering, but you may have a really blown out highlight. So if I bring maybe this light in, maybe I can do it with this light a little bit better. So right here, you know, we're looking at a scene here, right? So I've got this setup, and I'm in the kind of highlight spot metering. This is saying like, hey, you've got a really, really bright highlight in here, so my priority is to make sure that that doesn't get completely lost in the entire frame. But then if I come in and I change this to regular spot metering and then move this out of that, now you see that it changes. It ignores the really bright highlight. So ultimately, Martin, the way to think about the highlight weighted spot metering is it's a mode to be able to do spot metering, but it's looking at the brightest part of the frame. So it's saying like, hey, you have a really, really bright blown out highlight that I want to protect. So it uses that as the spot. In some ways, I think you could say it would be like the opposite of a spot meter, where a spot meter is literally like, look at this particular point and expose to make this gray, and I don't care what anything else does. It's the opposite. It's look at the entire frame and find the brightest point and make sure that that's not overexposing and put that into the middle. Just kind of opposite ways of thinking how to work with them. So hopefully that helps. Where did we go? On the S5 II, how can I turn the AF on or half press shutter button into a 20x manual focus toggle? I want to push either. Then have 20x preview release with normal possible. So I think, let me reset this here. This light out of there. Let's put this back up here. And let's mount. Maybe you'll stay up there for me now. Maybe not. Yeah, it's fine. Close enough. Okay, so we're looking at how can I turn the AF on or half press shutter button into a 20x magnification toggle. So one of the things, if you're going to want to customize any of the general buttons and things on your camera, is you're going to go into the gear menu here, which is the custom menu. And then you're going to go to FN button customization, which I believe is right here. So it's going to be under the operations page. And it's going to say FN button set. Now, since AF on is by default set to turn AF on, it means that if you do the press and hold method, it's not going to do anything because the function that's assigned to it natively out of the box is a press and hold function. So you go to FN button set, you go into the rec mode, and then you scroll down and you find the AF on button. So right here, I see the AF on button. It's natively programmed to AF on. If I click into here, you basically are going to look through and see like, okay, let's see what's available. There is the AF point scope, which if I do this, let me double check here. It's been a while since I used point scope on any of that. And actually, because I'm over HDMI, I might not be able to demo this super cleanly. Let's see here. Let's do enlarged only before recording. No. So, okay. So, you're trying to do punch in for it. You might have me fooled. Let me unplug this HDMI and see if it's because I'm attached to an HDMI. AF point scope. So we're going to go to... I can comfortably say that I am not infallible in being stumped on how to set certain things up in the cameras. So this one might be one that's gonna stump me. Okay. All right. I think I got it. Let's see if it does it over HDMI now. Yes. Okay. So what I reprogrammed the AF on button to do here is I go to FN button set, go to record, and then I go to the AF on set here, and I do, in this case, enlarged live display video. What this allows me to do is then press this, because I'm in video in this particular mode, and then I can do a punch in. For video capture, it is a 6x only. So that's what you have. You have up to a 6x punch in for to check here. Now, if I put the camera into a photo mode and I do the same thing, you'll see that in photo mode, it's not doing anything. I'm pressing the button here. For photo mode, this is where you have another option called point scope, where I can press this and it will let me punch in. Now again, windowed view is going to be a 6x punch in. That's what you get out of it. If you want to do something where you want to be able to punch into a 20x on the newer cameras, the S5 Mark II, the S5 Mark II X, GH7, this is where you would go in and you look at the focus system here. And I believe it's under the manual focus control, manual focus assist. You would go into full, and actually the GH7 might not have that one particularly on there, but your camera will. It will have the ability to change the full zoom into a 20x, which the GH7 just natively has it. So now I can come in and I can do my manual focus with 20x. It wouldn't be something that you can override as a video kind of thing, because video is always going to be locked into that 6x within a window. So yeah, that's how that system's going to work. Let's see here. Will LUMIX have a booth at CES in January? Any LUMIX presence at CES is always within the Panasonic booth. It's one company presentation there. Any way to use S5 II with iPhone 15 Max as a monitor like Sony? You can use the LUMIX Sync app. You can connect USB over for the connection there, but you're going to use the LUMIX Sync app as the remote control for it. That would give you control over the camera and a moderate resolution to use as a monitor, but not necessarily like what I think you're referencing. Is the roadmap for L-mount with a super zoom accurate? Hoping LUMIX can beat the competition with a super telephoto zoom lens. The Sigma is the only available option. I mean, our roadmap is what it is for being published. Yeah. FC in fashion shows. In fashion shows where background is a huge monitor with lots of lights, so model ends up dark. But when model walks in front of dark, model is overexposed. What metering mode do you recommend? That's a challenging one. So typically for situations like that, where like if you're shooting against a real heavy backlight and you're moving from heavy backlight to not heavy backlight, right? You're moving to maybe a more normalized background. This is where, because it's a similar situation that like street photography has, where, you know, if you're trying to photograph someone and they keep walking between shade and direct sunlight, this is where you want to try to let some of the functionality be about as automatic as you can. So what I mean by that is, if you're only ever worried about what the model or the subject is, that their exposure is correct, you're gonna have to make the choice that either you want the background just completely blown out, because they're standing in front of a backlit scenario. By doing that, that's where you're probably going to want to work more with potentially spot meter, and then make sure that you are adjusting or setting your adjustments up so that as that person's kind of moving through and you're making sure that that spot meter follows your subject, that, you know, maybe ISO is the variant that you let adjust. Maybe you're in aperture priority and you let your shutter speed adjust within bounds. By doing that, you'll basically allow the camera to be able to do some of the adjustments behind the scenes, knowing that you're trying to keep the particular point that you're metering for at a specific point. So kind of what I can do to probably demo or at least show you this visually. So if I go back into, say, photo mode here. If I go in and I set my metering to, let's say, center weighted, right? Or to spot metering. So I've got it set to spot, and I have my subject's always going to be, say, like right there, right? Because this is tied to the focus point. So if I have that there, and then I have my ISO set, and I'm in, let's say, aperture priority. So I have all of this stuff set. As I move my my light around, you'll see that it's changing a little bit of the exposure because I'm letting the ISO kind of shift around. But even if I turn this to where, you know, we're close, it's still pretty close to the proper exposure, because it's gonna adjust a bit until I go right in to change the spot. But I also have auto white balance lock turned on, and you can have a couple of other things as well that, you know, lock your exposure. So that's one way to do it. The other kind of probably maybe easier way to do it is you just shoot manual, set your exposure, and know that, okay, this is where the subject's going to be. This is the brightness level that I want. And then either if you're able to use fill flash or something that's going to help kind of offset that, that's what you do. When I've shot some stuff like that, like red carpet type stuff, I've shot against, heavily lit backlighting. I don't think I've ever run into a situation where I couldn't have a flash with me. And in the photography sense, that's going to be, the pro or the proper way to do that is have a flash, because you need to offset that light. And the flash at that point is just a little bit of fill so that you can keep a normal exposure, but know that your flash is going to just push maybe a little bit extra light when they're backlit to, bring them back into closer point. Modern cameras have also gotten really good. I know if, the edit and post kind of thing is not really a great tactic. But you do have some flexibility there too. So as long as you're like really, really close to the ballpark for, run and gun photography, you'll be good to go. On the video side, it's a bit more challenging, because you are going to have to constantly think about, well, I can't change because I'm looking at the series of the video and it's constantly changing. That will be a bit more difficult. And that's where NDs can come into play if it's that big of a background or a backlighting. That's where, potentially using, auto ISO can be a benefit as well. While you're in manual and you're just kind of setting yourself up right because you know where you want to be. And again, spot metering can help there as well, because if you want spot metering, let your auto ISO do the adjustments to bring the exposure proper to where that spot is. It just gets maybe a little more challenging, because if you're in spot meter, especially in video, the thing you have to be careful about is that if I move that point and say it goes right to my black shirt, well, it's going to raise the exposure for every single thing that's in the frame, and that may not look great. So yeah, it's not an easy thing. And I don't really think there's any super easy way to correct it, but yeah. Let's see here. Just to clarify, the S5 IIX cannot do the subject detect lock. The S5 can. I know the S5 II is a lot more advanced focusing, but still can be very useful with groups of people. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. The original S5, its subject detection in full area was a separated mode. It was, if you look at the way the modes are set out in that, the original S5, your human detection, like that stuff was all the way on the left side past the tracking mode. And that was, originally, that was the only way you could do it. Later on, we moved to where you can have subject detection in all of the other sub modes as well. And that's where that departure came in those changes. But we've asked a number of people, we've had a lot of requests to say, like, hey, in full area, can you bring back that locking functionality? But yeah, for that, I don't really have an update any further than that. So Martin says, thanks, Sean. On GH7, highlight weighted seemed to work the other way than the GH6. Experiencing auto ISO shift up and down too quickly. Scene was person spinning spinning with a black backdrop and part of the clothing white, nowhere near overexposure. GH6 doesn't do that. Yeah, I mean, some of the metering systems are a little different between each other. There will be little differences. Like, if I remember right on the GH6, because I don't have mine plugged in to where I can actually use it. The GH6, I don't think spot metering was always tied to the focusing point. So, yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, okay. Just joining. Could you go over how to make a LUT from Lightroom Classic preset? Thanks in advance. Love and appreciate the videos. So, Kenneth, the only way I know to make presets from, or to make LUTs from Lightroom presets is you have to use an external software that takes the preset files and converts them. I don't have enough experience with using any of those programs to make any recommendation on it. Because I get hesitant when there's another third party involved with having to do that, because I do not want to recommend you to go out there and use any piece of software that I've never used myself, because, I don't know what the companies are, how reputable those companies are, what kind of the program is. But I know that there is software, or there is services out there that you can take your Lightroom presets, export them into this program, and then have it kick out a .cube file. And there's entire walkthroughs for it. I just have to do more research on it because I've never had to do it. I just go into Photoshop and create a look that way, because Photoshop has the ability to directly export out a .cube file. So that's what I've usually done. And I think you can apply those presets from Lightroom into Photoshop as well. So like if you edit with layers, you would do a camera raw layer, apply the preset that you're looking at, and then you can have that whole thing. As long as you leave the layers open, you can export all those layers out into a .cube file. Let's see here. Art Vision, you guys had asked a couple things here. Let's see here. I saw you had put a couple questions, or a question up a little bit higher. So let me see if we can get in there. Okay, that's more of commentary. Okay, Art says, a great idea would be to leverage the S9's internal metering capabilities to coordinate with an external flash. Canon has that. Would love to see you pair with Godox or make a flash. Interesting concept. I would have to talk with engineering team to see about that. We do make flashes, and we do already have compatibility with Godox flashes. Actually, I have a whole system of them over here. But TTL is an interesting thing. Depending on the level of what you're using the flashes for is where you kind of get into some of the weeds of the conversations, that flash is flash and TTL is a whole separate type of flash firing. So this is, we tried to connect the S52X Wi-Fi source with our iPhone, but it seems to not work. Is there a reason for that versus commercial or home Wi-Fi? Art Vision, can a cell phone hotspot be used with the Lumix cameras? We have a problem pairing with our iPhones. Have you tried? Yeah, so as far as like the commercial Wi-Fi, the only thing that would be potentially blocking the cameras from working, like to connect into, say, like a building's Wi-Fi, and then a device on that Wi-Fi being able to access it, that's going to be up to how your system administrator has set up security for that Wi-Fi. Whether or not devices can be recognized across the network by each other. If that's disabled, then no, you're not going to be able to do like connecting to a business Wi-Fi and then have your cell phone connected onto the same Wi-Fi and then talk to each other. Usually you can talk to potentially like a system administrator or someone, or network IT team that's running that, because what they would probably be able to do is look at the MAC addresses of the camera, of the mobile device, and like kind of basically whitelist them to say like, yes, these two devices are okay to talk to each other. But you do start to get into like a lot of, is it worth it kind of thing. But yeah, you can use a hotspot on your phone. You would just turn the hotspot on, make sure that your password is set properly, connect to it just like you connect to a regular Wi-Fi thing, and then you're good to go. But yeah, let's see here. Shiny Tech says, the USB-C Ethernet adapters that are listed for the GH7 are no longer manufactured. What chipsets was the GH7 engineered to work with, so I can find a compatible adapter that's on your current list? That's a good question. I would have to check with the validation team who worked on that. If that particular one has been discontinued, I'm sure they are aware of it, and they're probably just working to find a replacement with it. Anchor tends to be the company so far that I've seen that we probably are going to be able to validate one with, but I would have to check with them and then be able to get you, because honestly, I don't know exactly what the details were with it. I know that it does need to be a 1 gigabit USB-C to Ethernet adapter. I accidentally bought a 2.5 gigabit Ethernet adapter, and it does not work. Camera tells me you cannot use this device. So I would have to just go check the other one there. Let's see here. Art says, let's say we use just a service carrier like AT&T, but it doesn't work on the go. It's for Frame.io on the go. We tried the password and hotspot, and for some reason it doesn't work. Might have to call the phone provider. Yeah, Art. So you may want to double check and make sure like what your tethering functionality is on the mobile devices, because I've done Frame.io on my iOS device, which is a T-Mobile device, and on my Android, which is running Google Fi, which again is basically T-Mobile as well. And they work perfectly fine for it. I did also do, when we were at Adobe Max, I was doing Frame.io, camera to cloud, photos, sending right up in there, and also syncing them to my Lightroom catalog, all on the conference center Wi-Fi. So 100% I know that it works. So it might just be either the provider that you're working with the carrier. Just double check, make sure you have a tethering plan with it. And also check what those speeds are, because it's possible some tethering plans may only be down to 2G level service for tethering, unless you are going into like a 5G tethering plan. So you can run into some challenges like that with tethering. But I know that at least as far as when I was doing this at Adobe Max, the conference Wi-Fi, like in the Miami Beach Convention Center, was allowing me to do this as well. So, I only got to about half of the stuff that I wanted to get to, but that's okay. We will be able to get to these when I come back. Probably next week, I think we'll be able to do it. I have to travel next week. Actually, I'm going back up to our office for some meetings with the rest of my marketing team. I think I'll be able to do a live stream next week on Thursday. I may actually pull it ahead by about an hour, just because it's going to get close to when I have to go to the airport. Or I'll do it from the airport. Who knows? So yeah, we will be back next week. It will be a live stream. I'm just working out exactly what time it's going to be. And then the following week is going to be a recorded stream. The following week is going to be Thanksgiving. So obviously I'm not going to be streaming during that, but I will have a recorded stream that will go up for that. If I didn't get to your question, or it's something that we need to kind of look more into for maybe next week, drop it into the comment section after this video is posted. This way I can make sure that I put it into my stream notes for next week to make sure that I get to it. It's one of the things that I'm working on trying to get better at, is if I miss a point from last week to this week, that I get to it. A lot of times people tend to bring the questions back up, so we end up getting through a lot of them. But yeah, otherwise, thank you everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate everyone's back and forth in the chat. I know it was a little bit more kind of a little more all over the place with some of the plan of what my topic was for today. But I appreciate everyone sticking around and still giving us all the commentary and the feedback and awesome questions to be asked. Yeah, otherwise, I hope everyone has a really good rest of your day. I hope you have an awesome weekend. Get out there, create some cool stuff. If you like the video, give us a like. If you don't subscribe already, think about subscribing. Helps the channel grow. And yeah, otherwise, I will see everybody next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time here on YouTube on LUMIX Live. Later.